Welcome to this series on insights from mid-20th century sociology. If you've encountered sociology before and found it focused mostly on inequality, activism, or critique, you're not alone. But that's only part of the picture. Sociology also offers a powerful way to understand stability, interdependence, function, and dysfunction, concepts that are incredibly useful for anyone trying to make sense of the world. In this series, we're focusing on systems thinking and the structural functionalist tradition. These ideas were central to sociology in the mid-20th century. Our goal is to bring them back into the conversation as an essential perspective that helps explain how order is maintained, how groups adapt, and how pressure for change can be utilized for stability. Each episode is just a starting point, an introduction that scratches the surface of ideas. The goal is to spark your curiosity and invite you to explore the foundations of the discipline more deeply. Whether you're a leader, a parent, teacher, or a thoughtful person trying to strengthen your community, these ideas can help. They give us a language to describe how systems succeed or falter and how individuals and institutions interact. Here's some background on the sociologists introduced in this episode. Talcott Parsons is a central figure in what's called structural functionalism, which we'll define in episode 2 more. His book, The Social System, in 1951, outlined how society maintains order and coherence by meeting key functional needs. He introduced a framework we'll explore in this episode, the AGIL model. Nicholas Luhmann extended systems thinking into the realm of communication. In his later and final works, like Social Systems, he argued that communication is the basic operation of society, and that different systems like law, politics, education, each operate according to their own communication logic. C. Wright Mills is not a functionalist, but his work helps us bridge personal experience with broader social structures. In the sociological imagination, he showed how personal experiences often reflect systems conditions. These thinkers differ in their focus, but they share an interest in how systems work, how parts relate to wholes, and how patterns of behavior emerge from relationships, expectations, and shared meanings. So let's dive into social systems thinking, a perspective familiar to anyone who understands ecosystems. At its simplest, a system is a set of interconnected parts that interact to produce outcomes. These parts can include people, institutions, norms, ideas, expectations, and roles, all interacting together. Talcott Parsons, our starting point, focuses on what he calls systems of action. By action, Parsons means behaviors guided by intentions, goals, and expectations, actions shaped by norms and roles within a group. He emphasizes equilibrium, or a system's tendency toward stable functioning, even as conditions change. The goal isn't complete stasis, it's adaptation and ongoing coordination that results in long-term overall stability. Think about roles like teacher, parent, or employee. Each role comes with norms, shared expectations about behavior. When these roles are aligned and function smoothly, the system maintains equilibrium. But life is dynamic. Jobs change, families shift, institutions evolve. Systems must adapt to survive. To understand what is required for systems stability, Parsons developed the AGIL model, which outlines 4 core functions that any social system must fulfill. First, adaptation. The system must adjust to its environment and secure necessary resources. Think of a school that updates its curriculum to meet new labor market demands, or a family shifting routines after a parent starts night shifts. Next, goal attainment. The system must define and pursue objectives. A nonprofit might work toward improving the community. A family might aim to save for college. Goal setting helps the system stay focused and mobilize resources. Integration. The parts of the system must coordinate. People must perform their roles well and resolve conflict. A sports team that works smoothly, even under pressure, is a great example of successful integration. Finally, latency or pattern maintenance. The system must preserve values and renew the motivations that sustain participation. This function includes socialization, culture, and rituals, from Sunday night gatherings to mission statements. Let's apply this to a community center as a system. As a system, it adapts to demographic shifts by adding programming for older kids. It sets measurable targets for outreach. It promotes cohesion through staff training and team building. And finally, it maintains its identity with annual events and volunteer appreciation rituals. These four functions help us diagnose problems and strengths within systems. When things go wrong in a group or organization, it's often because one of these functional needs is being ignored, or because success in one area is creating strain in another. But systems thinking is not just about categorizing functions. It's also about understanding feedback loops and about the way change in one part of a system can ripple through others. A parent's new job might affect dinner times, which in turn affects children's sleep schedules and school performance. That performance could then influence parental stress, which feeds back into the system. In systems thinking, a recursive system is one where the output becomes part of the new input. The system keeps running by using what it just did to decide what to do next. It doesn't always need something new from the outside. It mostly works with its own stuff. We also see emergence, where new behaviors or institutions arise spontaneously from interactions within the system. These aren't top-down decisions. They're bottom-up adaptations. Think of a neighborhood that informally starts a childcare rotation when school is canceled. No one planned it, but it emerges from need and connection. Niklas Luhmann expands systems thinking into the realm of communication. He argued that social systems are composed not of individuals, but of communications, the flow of meaning and information. A legal system communicates through rulings and procedures. A religious system communicates through sermons, rituals, and sacred texts. Society, Luhmann says, is a network of overlapping communicative systems. In fact, he was sometimes criticized for not paying that much attention to people. Luhmann really wanted to talk about communication, and perhaps especially about meaning. Much of his work can feel abstract and difficult to navigate, but his ideas help us understand why organizations sometimes talk past each other. Schools, families, media, and governments all operate with different codes and logics of communication. Let's start with a practical example that many of you might relate to. Imagine you've had a frustrating experience with a large organization. Maybe it's your health insurance company, the financial aid office, or your internet provider. You explain your situation in detail, expecting a thoughtful response. But what you get is a form letter that clearly didn't take your story into account. You might think, did they even read what I wrote? Luhmann's systems theory helps explain why this kind of thing happens. From his perspective, these organizations aren't made up of people responding to people. Instead, they are communication systems with their own internal logic. They only process information that fits their criteria for what's meaningful. So, your emotional appeal or your detailed backstory might simply not register unless you frame your message in a way that fits the system's code. In the case of insurance, that code might be valid claim versus invalid claim. Everything else is, in a sense, invisible to the system. Luhmann calls this reduction of complexity. Systems have to narrow down what they pay attention to because the world is too complex to take in all at once. This leads us to another everyday application: navigating bureaucracies and formal institutions. Whether you're applying for a student loan, trying to renew a visa, or appealing a parking ticket, you're interacting with highly structured systems: finance, government, law, each of which possesses communication processes. Luhmann would caution us against assuming that our personal logic, like this isn't fair or I need help, will automatically be effective. Instead, to be heard by that system, we need to speak its language. That might mean citing a policy number, referencing a statute, or attaching the right form. The takeaway here is that while it can be alienating, it's not necessarily personal. These systems aren't ignoring you out of cruelty or incompetence. They're just structured to respond to particular kinds of input. Recognizing that could help us design better systems or be more strategic and less frustrated when dealing with complex institutions. Finally, C. Wright Mills, who isn't generally seen as a systems theorist or structural functionalist, but his insights certainly complement this approach. In the sociological imagination, Mills reminds us that personal experiences are often symptoms of broader structural issues. A father losing his job isn't just unlucky. He's affected by global markets, technological change, and national policy. Mills helps us see that institutions overlap and that people live in the interaction of those family, work, religious, and governmental institutions. So, what unites all these thinkers is a shared conviction that we live in systems, and those systems shape what we experience, what we value, and what we do. Understanding them gives us more than knowledge, it gives us tools. To see how these abstract ideas play out in everyday life, let's turn to a real-world example, not of a government agency or a corporation, but of something closer to home, a family. Meet the Mitchells. Sarah and James have 3 children. For several years, they've been homeschooling. Sarah manages most of the schooling. James works a predictable 9-to-5 job as an accountant. Their routine is solid. Meals, lessons, chores, all are guided by shared expectations. Roles are clearly defined and the system runs smoothly. Then life changes. James gets a promotion that requires frequent travel and unpredictable hours. Suddenly, Sarah must take on more household responsibilities. The routines that once offered stability are disrupted. Sarah feels overwhelmed. The shared family dinners and bedtime rituals begin to slip. The Mitchells are now facing stress, conflict, and miscommunication. At the same time, Emily, the oldest child, expresses a desire to enroll in the local public high school. The transition introduces the family to new systems, schedules, testing requirements, social networks, and these changes don't only affect Emily. They also pull the entire family into a new rhythm, forcing them to renegotiate how they spend time and what roles they play. With a systems lens, we can see this as an adaptive moment for the Mitchell family. Without that lens, it would be easy to default to an insular view, meaning that we are just seeing one person or one component as an island without context and in a vacuum. Like that, one might look at this family and say, James isn't doing his part anymore now that he's always traveling for work. Or Sarah just can't keep up. Maybe she's not trying hard enough. Or the kids, they're acting out. Must be hormones. These are overly simplistic interpretations that overlook the interconnectedness of roles and responsibilities. A systems approach encourages us to ask instead, how are role changes in one part of the family affecting the rest? What norms are being strained or renegotiated? What routines and values need to be reaffirmed or adjusted to meet new demands? Here we can vividly apply the AGIL model. Adaptation. The Mitchells begin restructuring routines. Chores are redistributed. Sarah drops some extracurricular responsibilities. They install a shared calendar and shift school hours. Goal attainment. They clarify their priorities. James commits to attending family dinners on Sundays. Emily gets support adjusting to the public school system. Sarah sets more manageable goals for daily lessons. The family sees James' new job as a fundamental support for the system. Integration. Communication becomes central. The family starts weekly check-ins to discuss how everyone is doing, which reinforces emotional cohesion. They look for ways to share and learn certain vocabularies, and they use communication media that work for everyone. Finally, latency. They hold onto important rituals. Game night on Fridays, pancake breakfasts on Saturdays. These offer stability in the midst of change. Feedback loops are evident. James' job stress affects Sarah's mood, which affects the children's school experience, which in turn affects James' sense of support when he returns home. Adjustments in one area, like moving Emily to public school, trigger new needs and negotiations in others. Emergent behaviors also appear. Ben, the middle child, takes on a leadership role, helping Ava, the youngest, with reading when Sarah's too busy. Ava starts organizing craft projects to keep herself occupied. These weren't assigned roles. They emerged from the shifting dynamics. Luhmann's view of communication is especially relevant here. Misunderstandings arise not necessarily because anyone has bad intentions, but because each member of the family is suddenly operating in a slightly different system with its own expectations, schedule, and communication. James speaks the language of business travel and deadlines. Emily speaks the language of high school social life. Sarah is speaking in homeschool and home management. Without regular intentional communication, misalignment is inevitable. And as C. Wright Mills would remind us, none of this is happening in a vacuum. James's demanding travel schedule is shaped by economic trends and company policy. Emily's school pressures reflect national testing standards, peer culture, and public education norms. These are social structures, which we will say much more about in this series, and they're intersecting with personal choices. The Mitchell story wasn't one of collapse, just one of thoughtful adjustment. They demonstrated resilience, not by sticking rigidly to exact old roles, but by adapting those same roles and norms just enough to maintain connection and stability. The system bends but doesn't break. This kind of example helps us to see how systems thinking provides a richer, more empathetic understanding of human behavior. It encourages us to see individuals not as isolated agents, but as actors within a dynamic network of expectations, roles, and institutions. To wrap up this episode, here are a few questions to help you reflect on the ideas we've briefly explored. Number 1, have you been part of a group where you recognize the interconnectedness of roles and responsibilities? Number 2, can you think of a time when a tiny adjustment to a rule or a status, like a tweak in a video game or a rule change in sports, completely reshaped how people played, what strategies worked, or even who had an advantage? Number 3, can you recall a change in one area of your community or workplace that unexpectedly impacted another area? Number 4, have you ever consciously adjusted your role in a group to improve its overall functioning? And finally, 5, have you observed situations where stability persisted because the system effectively adapted? These questions are designed to help you see how systems thinking applies to everyday life. It's not just theory, it's a lens that helps us better understand how people, institutions, and their behaviors interact. So thank you for joining me in this first episode. In our next installment, we'll explore how individuals navigate structures, how choices, actions, and personal responsibility play out within broader institutional contexts. We'll meet thinkers like Norbert Elias and Robert Merton and continue building our sociological toolkit. See you in episode 2.